lot of misconception about AI. It's a bubble. What is your first take on the AI boom?
I'm obviously extremely biased. I think we're at the very early stages, especially when you think about the World Wide Web was being created and you had different browsers competing like Netscape and others. I think we're still in the Netscape era.
Hi, welcome back to Pine Speaker Series. I'm joined by my friend, investor from Middle East, Tala, who's here for a Milken conference in Singapore and F1. Welcome to Singapore and welcome to Pine's office.
Thank you, Hyuk Tae. Hi, I'm Tala Al Jabri. I'm the managing partner of Wyld VC, a fund that focuses on AI companies and being a bridge between Silicon Valley and the Middle East, and hopefully Asia in the future.
You just recently launched Wyld Ventures. Tell us about Wyld and what you're investing in.
Yeah, absolutely. So Wyld is really the culmination of my career, which, I didn't plan, but it just sort of happened. But essentially what we do is we're an early stage fund focused on AI firms based in primarily Silicon Valley and the Middle East. So we look for Series A plus companies focused on MLOps, as well as certain vertical applications like cybersecurity, financial services, industrials, and smart cities. We focused on those verticals because where we feel we add value is in helping to unlock capital, go to market, and compute resources for our portfolio, all with the angle of accessing the Middle East.
So, given your focus in AI, a lot of our viewers who are mostly from South Korea and Southeast Asia, they're very interested in your views for the growth of AI. Every week there's something new happening. There's also a lot of misconception about AI, whether it's a bubble, whether it's really going to deliver the return profile that these valuations are going for. So what is your first take on the AI boom in general?
I'm obviously extremely biased. I think we're at the very early stages, especially when you think about the days of when the World Wide Web was being created and you had different browsers competing like Netscape and others. If you talk to Gen Zs, they probably never heard of Netscape, but they've definitely heard of Chrome. So I think we're still in the Netscape era. So we have still a lot of room to grow. If you talk to people who are building out AI factories or otherwise known as GPU clusters, they'll tell you we are so short of supply. And so I come from that universe, but I also like hearing differing perspectives on the sector. I also feel like it's going to be very transformative in many ways, especially in the ways that we work, the ways that we live, and the ways that we interact with each other. But I also think that we're not going to be in an age of abundance. Everyone's talking about being in an age of abundance and not having enough things to do. We found time and time again with platform shifts that the nature of the work changes. Right? Whether that's, the first industrial revolution, which, by the way, took 100 years to materialize, right? It's not something that happens in 10 years. The nature of what we do is constantly going to change. And we're, what makes us distinctive as human beings is we always want more. And we innovate because we want to discover more. We are not very complacent, especially people who operate in the innovation ecosystem. So I feel quite optimistic. A lot of people in the ecosystem talk about taste and the importance of taste. And I think I think what that translates into is creativity. And so I think what's amazing is this is the most profound and important time for creative minds, whether you're in arts, but also if you're in scientific fields, to really sort of flex that muscle in a way that before we were just wrapped up in doing sort of automated things that weren't always super exciting. So there's always going to be new work that I think will be created. I think everyone knows there was no such thing as a social media manager. I remember when I first heard about that job, I thought it was a joke. I was like, people get paid to tweet, and but I was wrong, right? Joke's on me. So I think that we're going to experience something similar with this next wave, and I'm biased again, but I'm quite optimistic.
So I want to double click into that in terms of your investment thesis, because AI is a big word and it's a very broad concept. Just like nobody's now saying we're an internet company or we're a mobile company. When smartphone came around, everyone was somehow a mobile app company. So yeah, what is your sort of differentiated view? What is your approach with AI investing? And there's a lot of new words being created like AI agents, Gen AI, these new metrics for VCs to measure, such as revenue per employees now, because people are hiring few people and still generating a crazy amount of ARR. So yeah, how are you approaching this space?
Love the question. So I started investing primarily in the Middle East in the, let's say, replica era where we had the fortune of seeing what was starting to really take off in places like the US, especially. If you take Uber as an example, recreating that model for the Middle East, for emerging markets, right? You didn't really need to be a technical founder. You just needed to hire technical talent. Some back-end engineers, front-end engineers, and just continue to iterate. I think with this next era, what's really different is you need technical founders to really create a solid moat. We know today that you are ever more powerful by just knowing natural language and can program just by typing into a chatbot. And so if anyone can do that, what's really the moat, right? And so I think that having a technical background where maybe this sounds very prescriptive, but it's true, a master's at the very least or PhD in computer science, mathematics, or a related field is important. And so we actually will typically invest in at least in a founding team that has at least one such technical founder. You also need to pair that obviously with like a go-to-market person. But I think that's critical and that differentiates it. Obviously, we're still in the early stages of AI. I think what AI's been around, the technology itself has been around for some time. Machine learning's been around for a long time. Your recommendation engines obviously use machine learning and reinforcement learning. But I think what makes this era different is obviously the generative aspect, especially with the ChatGPT moment in 2023. So I think that this is what people are really referring to today when they talk about AI. We as a firm look at obviously generative AI. We also look at the underlying infrastructure. So that's like the software, the middle layer, helps to power the models, the foundation models more effective, to organize data, create data in some cases, still early stages.
I want to double click into that, Tala, because there's probably every day I am bombarded with thousands of different AI verticals being transformed. And so what are some of the good examples of companies you're looking into, invested, or thinking about investing?
Great question. So, we made a decision quite early on as a firm, and I mean, we could be wrong, but we don't really believe in horizontal AI. So that's applications that cut across different sectors. And there's two reasons for this. We think data in a particular industry carries moat. And we also believe that, especially in sort of the biotech and healthcare space, that there is room to actually create new foundation models that only focus on that type of data. Horizontal AI, we think, is going to be solved by the foundation models, right? As they stack more and more applications on top of their foundation, on top of their models. If you take coding as an example, right? Like we saw Cursor go from $0 to $100 million in revenue in no time. We saw Windsurf obviously get acquired as well, obviously in a very interesting way, but nonetheless. But you're seeing Anthropic's coding platform increasingly taking up more and more share. Similar things with OpenAI's coding platform, as well as Gemini especially. And so we think that with horizontal AI, when you don't have data as a moat, you're going to see the foundation models being comparatively better, actually just building those products internally themselves and then stacking them. Whereas with industrials, like I mentioned, whether it's robotics, whether it's biotech and healthcare, there is a moat. And obviously as a VC, you want as much as possible to invest in companies that you think can really go all the way. And so that's the space that we think is really, really exciting. There's also an open question around whether you need sort of AI native databases, because AI today can literally understand natural language and can be multimodal. So can sort of access photos, generate video. And so, so I think that the moats are really going to be around these vertical, especially if you get access to proprietary data. And I also see a use case where you can build at the infrastructure layer. I don't feel anymore, and I could be corrected in the future, but I don't feel anymore that, people in the early days were saying every single company is going to have their own foundation model, but we're seeing the foundation models really catch up very quickly. And so I think what's going to happen is those foundation models are going to be the foundation, and then there's going to be middleware that's going to be built on top of that for specific use cases for different companies.
We have a lot of debate right now in South Korea, a topic around sovereign AI. And I think it goes back to what you just talked about in terms of foundation layer. So a lot of Koreans are saying, why should we invest in the foundation layer when there's already this type of very proven foundation model outside? And I don't know if the analogy makes sense, or whether you agree with it or not, is that they're like saying just because, say, Vietnam has rice production, that doesn't mean we should stop rice farming, because it's a food security and we should grow our own food rather than relying on just importing it. And so I want to ask you the same question, because there are already this $500 billion valuation companies, they're raising tens of billions of dollars. Next day we wake up, another company has raised a lot. So which stage of development do you focus on? Do you think there's still opportunity for you to invest in these foundation level, infrastructure level companies?
So I think on the topic of sovereign AI, I think it is actually very critical. And there are reasons why you would build a sovereign AI stack that sort of, go beyond sort of the potential economic value that it can create. In fact, it's more about national security and preserving culture. Because and a lot of people are using these chatbots for, therapeutic reasons, etc. It's actually one of the most common use cases is just companionship.
Yeah.
It's really important that we imbue our culture and our values in those and to have control over that. And I think what we learned with the era where Meta was playing and Facebook was playing is you couldn't really control public opinion on very controversial topics. Not that governments should necessarily be controlling that, but you want to ensure that your culture that you've spent centuries building continues, and you want to have control over how it's designed.
Also, the government, if I may add, just couldn't have effective control around any fraudulent information being spread very quickly, or just scams and things like that. I think even to date, the countries are still grappling with these type of problems, and they have no effective control other than trying to regulate these companies. But it's tough.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think they should control what the output is, but rather we should have an open source model, which means you can see the model weights, you can see the algorithm, but it should be built, it should be trained on your data, on your cultural values, right? ChatGPT 5, the release that came out about 2 months ago or so, allows you to sort of toggle between different personalities. But at the end of the day, it's not an open source model. And also it was designed by American engineers for the most part, right? So I think national security and preservation of culture for something that is going to be so profoundly impactful on our personal lives too is really important. In terms of foundation model investing, I do think that there are interesting verticals like bio and health, just because the data I don't think natural language, if you talk to medical experts and biotech professionals, is enough. And then obviously in understanding the physical world too, I think we're going to need other types of foundation models who understand the physical world. And the reason transformer models don't work is the variables in the physical world are so huge, right? Versus just written language and others. And then you have people like Fei Li working on these really important things. And she just put out a really good book called The World I See, and I really recommend.
So I want to take a step back and focus on you. As far as I know, your education mainly revolves around business and maybe public administrations. What did you study, and how did you get involved in the tech and investing world?
Yeah, thank you. So as an undergrad, I studied finance, and I did a minor in women's studies. I studied finance, honestly, because my mom gave me the opposite advice of what any Asian mom would say. And I think Middle Easterners are we're part of Asia. I very much relate to like Asian values. But she was like, listen, I studied engineering, but I ended up in business. Business seems like an easier degree. Just go do business. And since I love math, the closest thing to math was finance. So I ended up doing that. And then I did a minor in women's studies because it was my passion. I was just drawn to it because it's an interdisciplinary study. I don't think it exists anymore. I think it's now called gender studies. But it's all about the study society from the lens of, let's say, a minority class. And I found that sort of perspective to be very interesting. And what was really unique about it was the design of the class. And I only came to realize this many years later, but the way that we would conduct class in finance is, there would be a lecturer. That lecturer would sit at the middle of the room, and the students would be behind the lecturer, listening, taking notes. In women's studies, the classroom was designed very differently, where everyone sat in a circle and everyone had an opinion that was valuable. And so I quite appreciated that sort of dichotomy, and also found it hilarious that I would jump from a capital markets class to a women's studies class where it was staunchly anti-capitalist. So I've always appreciated listening to different perspectives. And so that's kind of what drew me. But I was also lucky that I studied finance, and I just naturally, because they tell you it's the right thing to do, gravitated towards investment banking, which actually didn't end up working out for me. So did that early in my career before going back into school and studying business. But anyone who's done an MBA in the US especially will tell you, you don't actually really study in the MBA program. And I didn't really have an objective. I just really wanted to go and meet amazing people and maybe party for 2 years. I don't know. But did that and did a dual degree at the Kennedy School, which is the School of Government, because I've always loved topics at the intersection of government and business. And I think this is what also drew me towards AI, because a lot of our strategy is about helping the Middle East see AI sovereignty. We have very low cost of energy. We have a lot of access to land. We have high market adoption relative to other countries on a per capita basis of AI. We have very clear regulations and guidelines around data sovereignty, AI use, etc. But the area that we have the biggest gap is really in R&D and in the dearth of technical talent that we have that's building in AI. And so that's sort of the gap that we're trying to address. So I think that's the mission that really drives us to do what we're doing.
So you were an early investor in Perplexity, and now it's become a multi-billion-dollar company, redefining how we search. Mm-hmm. And I really love the functionality where they really take time to think and do all the research rather than giving me a 5-second answer, which is filled with a lot of not accurate information or outdated information. So and everyone else is kind of following that as well. So how did you get to invest in the deal? What stood out early in the deal for you, and what have you learned along this journey of Perplexity becoming one of the largest AI companies in the world?
Yeah, well, I'm so glad to hear that you use it and that you're enjoying it. That's awesome. Honestly, it was a total coincidence. What had happened was I met Dimitri, who's the chief business officer at Perplexity, at the Milken conference. Mm. And I saw that he was speaking, and I chased him down and eventually got literally 5 minutes with him. I didn't really have an agenda except to really introduce myself. And I was like, this is what we do at Wyld. We basically help companies access opportunities in the Middle East. And he got it immediately, and he was like, we have a round right now. Do you want to come in? And I was like, perfect. And we won't do any deal where we can't support the founder and add value in one way or another. And so they were quite excited at the idea of obviously expanding to the Middle East. They've done a really great job, for example, signing deals in India with Singtel, where now every Singtel customer gets access to Perplexity Pro. And so I hope that we'll get to, support them in the Middle East to do that. I think what was different for me And I think it's really 50% of the equation is really the founders. Perplexity is incredibly ambitious. I think obviously their technical prowess speaks for itself. But I mean, these guys were going to Google and saying, we'll buy Chrome off of you, yeah. Right? And they were waiting for the judge to deliberate on it. Eventually, he said Google can keep Chrome because the chatbots are eating into their market share. They were going to do a $50 billion sort of tender for that. And so I really sort of loved just, how forward thinking they are. They also released Comet, which is the first AI browser. I don't know if you've had the chance to use it yet. It's really cool. I mean, on my last trip to the Bay Area, I asked it to basically find me a list of 10 people I should meet in the Bay Area based on 5 criteria. And going into my LinkedIn database, and it, gave me that list. It also helped me cancel a flight, a restaurant, and just getting accustomed to working on a browser like that is, it's quite cool and time saving.
And you just launched Wyld, so was Perplexity one of the first deals? How many deals have you done so far?
It was our very first deal, and we've just closed one this week, so we've done 3 deals. Okay. Our second deal was into a Abu Dhabi-based company called Applied AI. And so what they do is they build autonomous agents for regulated sectors. A majority of their sales are made in the US. There's a company that's backed by G42, which for anyone who doesn't know is the sovereign AI, let's say, entity based in the UAE, that's state-backed. And again, Arya is a founder I've known for probably 10 years. And there's nothing better than having had that experience without you even realizing or knowing that, of getting, intimate with a founder and knowing a founder so well, that I think helped make Arya stand out, in addition to obviously his other accomplishments and his aggressiveness and how sort of competitive he is.
I want to go back to the time you finished MBA and MPA, and then between that and Wyld. So we've worked with some of the most influential, well-known VC firms around the world, Andreessen, SoftBank, Hope Capital, with regards to Middle East as a context. So if you could shed a light on your experience and what was it like to work with these firms that have now become tens of billions, if not $100 billion, deploying at a global scale.
I knew from the moment that SoftBank came onto the scene, when I had at least first heard of them, especially when they launched the Vision Fund, which was the $100 billion fund that they launched, especially with His Royal Highness the Crown Prince Saudi and Mubadala, that's where I wanted to be. I'm attracted to people who have a different way of thinking, who are crazy enough to take it. That's why our firm is called Wyld. And I saw that in Masa. I mean, I think Masa is really, no one matches him. He's unmatched. He's lost his money, made it back as a billionaire 2 times over at least. And so, again, saw the Middle East sort of connectivity there and thought, wow, the marriage of innovation in the Middle East is exactly the intersection that I want to play. And so I was really fortunate to work with incredibly visionary, ambitious, smart, and humble people at the firm. And it was definitely a crazy time, because I remember when I joined, SoftBank was at its peak. Everyone was so enamored by SoftBank and just wanted to get to know them. And so I felt so lucky to be part of that ecosystem. And when you're in it, it's just, it's just normal. It's just your colleagues and whatever. And you sometimes forget just how profound of a mandate it was. But then we all learned lessons through that experience. And I really commend Masa for pulling off what he did, because if not for the mistakes that we did, we as an ecosystem, as a VC ecosystem, wouldn't have learned that writing really big checks into companies that are unproven could be materially really adverse. But at the same time, it also opened our minds to the fact that maybe we should be capitalizing, in some cases, companies even more. And that's when you started to see other funds, sort of following in Masa's footsteps in raising bigger and bigger funds. And I would say Andreessen is one of those companies. You started out with, smaller funds, and today probably have over 70 billion of AUM, which was crazy even, as far back as 2020, which wasn't that long ago. They've just grown exponentially in size. So it was a really profound time. And Andreessen was also really, really exciting. I was their Middle East advisor. So was working with the firm on some strategic initiatives. There was an alignment of values around how innovation is critical for an economy, how it's important to drive innovation. And I think Ben said it really well when he said at a Saudi-hosted forum that His Royal Highness is the founder and Saudi Arabia is the company. And I had never thought of it that way, but he was exactly right. And so I think there was just sort of confluence of shared values and mission. And I ended up working across the firm, also with over 50 companies. And it was just an honor, honestly, to be able to bring people. I hosted a lot of people in the Middle East. So it was just an honor to bring them there and be able to represent the country there, much like what you do with, Southeast Asia and your clients, which is amazing.
I love to also make comparisons as a way of learning. And we're in Singapore, and Singapore very much started as a startup as well when it separated from Malaysia back in roughly 7 years ago, and was in a very difficult situation when it first started. It was probably one of the poorest, and it doesn't have its water security and food security when it started. But now, fast forward many decades, now it's one of the most advanced, affluent country. You're visiting this week and you're seeing it for yourself. That's super clean, super safe. Many people around the world wants to visit. So yeah, it definitely can echo by having a leader as a founder mindset and really driving those changes. It's quite profound, but you only know it looking back, not looking forward. So I want to double click onto the phrase you've said it a few times, helping companies or investors expand into the Middle East. And those of us living in Southeast Asia, where I'm from in South Korea, also Middle East has been a talk of the town for many years. Probably during COVID, maybe obviously with such big investments into these tech VCs, and also a lot of the Korean companies going out there to build new initiatives in Saudi Arabia, both in Riyadh, Neom. So what does expand into Middle East mean for you, and for those of us in Far East Asia? How should we think about expanding into Middle East as a businessman?
Yeah, well, first I want to say Singapore has been it's been an incredible experience. I've absolutely loved being here. And Singapore, honestly, was the model for Dubai and is the model around the region, right? And, the former ruler was just so visionary, right? I mean, there was nothing here. So it's really important to take a moment to really appreciate what you've built here. It's so special. I think in terms of the Middle East is hungry for innovation. The Middle East, also, I don't want to put it into a monolith, but, our biggest export, of course, is still hydrocarbons. A lot of our economy is dependent on hydrocarbons. But what's amazing is we want to build for the future. So what will it take for us to leapfrog? We understand that technology is definitely one really important sort of industry that we want to expand into, and AI in particular, for all the reasons I mentioned before, has been a focus. The UAE is the first country in the world to have an AI minister. That minister is a human who represents the AI agenda, as opposed to like an AI digital twin or something. But I think that what's been remarkable about Asia is, I think Asia was underestimated by the West in terms of its innovative capacity, right? And I think there is this misconception in the West that you really need democracy and a Western style democracy to see innovation through. I'm not sure that is always the case, because I think culture and what motivates people can be very different. And I don't think that Americans who have only spent time in America really appreciate that. I think that Eastern values are very different. And in some ways, and in other ways, of course, it's the same. I mean, if you go to China, people are very capitalist. They want to win. They're competitive, and I think that's fantastic. But in many ways, also very different. So that's all to say there's a lot of innovation here. And this is why the region, the Middle East, is, very keen to have partnerships and technology transfer from Asia into the Middle East. I see a lot of opportunity for collaboration and an exchange of trade. Japan's biggest gas supplier is Qatar. I think China obviously gets a lot of its oil from Saudi, but I believe produces its own oil as well. But there's a symbiotic relationship there, and most importantly, there's an alignment of values, I think.
I'm gonna ask some spicy questions if you don't mind, because a lot of us, I run a fund as well, and have gone out to Middle East probably with the agenda of fundraising. But I start to see some shifts in tones, especially with Milken last year and Milken this year. A lot of the sovereign fund CEOs come and say, we will still invest in managers, but you need to invest in Middle East. So my question to you is there enough companies to invest in Middle East as a first question? And two, the locals, the population is not as big as in China, Korea, Japan, or even Southeast Asia, Indonesia, India. So that's something I'm grappling with. How big can the TAM be? Because we are all talking about TAMs and SOMs, and how should we look at Middle East in that lens?
It's a great question. I think that you're right. I think dominating China or dominating the US is like dominated collectively as, let's say, the MENA region, if we expanded beyond just the Middle East. We're a 400 million person population. I think Indonesia alone has 300 million people. So there's definitely not, let's say, a, sort of critical mass of people if you wanted to sort of focus on acquiring every single customer in that space. But I think it depends, right? You need to slice it and dice it by market. If you talk about beauty, I can tell you the spend per capita is ridiculously high. If you talk to Sephora's best performing retail outlet is in Dubai Mall on spend per capita. I mean, it's an insane amount. When you talk about matters of security and national security, I think that there is actually a huge, because we don't really manufacture or have, at least today, let's say the R&D capacity to build our own. So for example, we had South Korea, help us build the UAE's nuclear plant. We work closely, Korean and Chinese firms, petrochemical and other advanced manufacturing.
Burj Khalifa was built by Samsung as well as a construction partner.
Exactly.
Not an easy project, building this massive, tallest building in the middle of desert. So there has been a lot of cutting edge technologies to make sure it doesn't sink or get knocked down by the strong wind.
Exactly. And I'm biased again, but I think B2G is really big. We're some of the biggest importers of military equipment. I think our biggest trading partner there, I think, is probably France the US and then France. So I think you kind of have to, so the answer is more nuanced, and it's up to that investor to really do their diligence around what makes sense.
I want to go back to your studies for the women's studies, gender studies. You're one of the most prominent female investors in the region. How do you see this generation, next generation of female leaders in venture tech shaping up?
Yeah, it's really different today. So when I started my career, and especially when I would work in Saudi, we had a gender segregated society. So in the workplace, not all workplaces had female only spaces. So that meant that they didn't hire women. So as an example, one of the world's largest petrochemicals firms, Saudi firm SoftBank, not sorry to call you out, but they didn't hire women until probably 2017.
So you mean in a meeting room, boardroom, you had to have a segregated meeting room back in the day, or offices?
We had segregated offices, yeah.
Wow, okay.
And so, to go from that to where we are today, where it's really normal for men and women to work together in a workplace, is really profound.
Less than 10 years.
Yeah, so that all started to change probably around 2018. 2016, but 2018 is when they kind of like started to mix. I remember attending a women's conference in Riyadh in, I want to say 2015 or 2014. And again, it was a segregated room. And I'm thankful to the men who came out. Like, honestly, amazing, remarkable. And there are so many incredibly supportive Saudi men, by the way, so many. Well, they were in a different room. And what's funny is, they had a camera going around and they didn't show the women's side. So they were only filming maybe the stage and then the men in the crowd. Because you're not allowed to, still today, film women without their permission around the region.
Hopefully I have your permission today.
Yes, definitely. So I think I'm very excited for the next generation. And I can tell you that, we have a very young population. About 70% are under the age of 30. They're very hungry in a way that I think people my age and older weren't hungry because we were just flush with oil. And now there is a burning platform and they have to work hard. And so for men and women alike, I'm very excited. And I think the only thing that sometimes keeps women back is just traditional family values. And you kind of have to convince your parents that it's okay if you're driving an hour away from your house. Like some people, like, it's not uncommon for you, if you were interviewing a Saudi candidate, for her to come with her dad, right? Like in the interview. So that can happen. And so they might, so parents may not, and this is where it's like Asian, right? And you might understand this, but the parents might say, no, you can't like work so far away. Like your workplace needs to be like 20 minutes drive max. So, but the women want to work hard. They want to accomplish, they want to be independent. They're very inspiring. Yeah,
I think we also have some of that among the Korean culture, where if you're probably living and working abroad, then may not be something that the parents would want. Maybe they would want to be closer to the home. But so I can definitely relate to that. I want to ask you the last question. We're in 2025, F1 Milken happening this week. Maybe in about 5 years, when we meet again in, say, 2030, how will Wyld VC look like, and what do you think you'll be doing in 5 years?
Oh man, that's such a scary question because, oh man. Well, I hope that Wyld by then would have, sort of demonstrated how it can really be a bridge, especially in AI, between Silicon Valley and the Middle East. Hopefully by then we will, as a country, because we have Vision 2030, accomplished a lot of our goals in terms of diversifying away. And I feel patriotic. I mean, I feel like our mission really is to help the Middle East diversify away, because we're not going to have hydrocarbons forever. Of course, I hope that we have successes under our belt, that we are able to distribute capital back to our investors, that we have a couple of funds under our belts. But I really hope more than anything else that we've come closer to accomplishing our mission of going back to what you were saying, getting closer to having sovereignty, but with global partnerships, because you can't do it alone.
Any comments, questions we didn't cover?
Well, I'd love to know where you would like Pine Capital and this podcast to be in 5 years.
Yeah, thank you. For that, I started off Pine in 2019 here in Singapore with the vision of building the best financial services firm in Asia for not only Asians, but also non-Asians who are excited about Asia's potential in technology, founders, companies going global. So we invest in those companies that could become global category number one, such as Ping Pong Baby Shark, that has really mastered the short form in the social media, including YouTube, that has the most number of views. That's why I'm doing this, because we have so many interesting people flying every week into Singapore at our office, and I just wanted to capture this insightful conversations. And YouTube can scale to billions, tens of billions. I've seen it with my own eyes, and can really reach audiences sitting in remote places just with their phone and internet. So I hope our conversation can really inspire a future generation who look up to you and become the next female VC, and people who want to get to know more about opportunities in the Middle East. And I also learned a lot today. I personally haven't been, so I'm very excited to go. I actually have quite a number of Korean clients who are doing businesses in in Riyadh. So I would like to go. I've seen a lot of Korean YouTubers who go and feature Saudi Arabia. So definitely you have my word. I'll be there. And yeah, I would like to continue to do this.
Hyuk Tae, we really, really look forward to having you in Riyadh and in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And I'm so excited to hear you'll be coming. That's awesome.
Okay, great. Thanks. And thanks for coming to our channel. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you again this year.
Thank you so much, Hyuk Tae. Really appreciate your time. Thank you, Pine Capital. It's been a pleasure.